Yo, this is Joel Davis,
And I'm Gracie Davis,
and this is Greater Than Real Estate.
where we go deep to find out who you really are beyond real estate.
All right, well, welcome back to Greater Than Real Estate with our newest guest, Dennis Tuttle. We're super excited to have Dennis here. Thanks for being here, Dennis.
Oh, thanks for having me. Honored to be here.
Yeah.
So I'd love to just start off by getting to know a little bit about you.
Yeah.
So just tell us a little bit about yourself, or where you're from, how you got into real estate, that kind of thing.
Okay, sure. So I grew up here. I grew up in DFW. I moved here from Austin when I was like 5 years old. I was moved. I didn't move. I was
Yeah.
5 years old. So moved here, and I got into real estate like right out of high school. So I was probably 18. So I've been in it for 20 years, and I started out on the investing side. So when I was in high school, I'm a musician. I play guitar mainly at church. But like my first business was a recording studio. So I had a studio in high school and college, and we were booked 3 months in advance at any given time.
Wow.
So that's how I made money. It was like my first business. And then, my goal, was I was like, well, I just want to be a rock star, play guitar professionally, and do that. And then my wife and I started dating like our senior year, right as we were finishing high school. And I was like, yeah, that's probably not the lifestyle. Like I already knew, like, I'm going to marry this girl. Like and she was definitely a homebody, dinner every night at the table with her family, all the stuff. And I was like, well, we get married, have kids. So I was like, I don't want to go down that route. And I had a lot of friends that went down the music road,
Really?
Got signed to record labels. And, the guy that, one of my best friends that I own the studio with, that's all he does professionally he's a producer. So,
Wow.
so a lot went into that world, but I was like, yeah, I don't really want to do that. And, one of the things I learned kind of early on looking at careers was the purpose of business or your career or opportunity, whatever it is to really fund your life's mission, right? Or fund your perfect life. And I always define perfect life as not just lifestyle, right? But like, how do I want to spend my time? How much money do I want to give? What do I want my home life to look like? What, all of that. So it's not just like I want to live here and drive this, but like perfect life, all of it together. And I grew up in a construction family. My dad owned a roofing company, still does. He's been doing that for over, I guess, 40 years now.
Wow.
And but he was in the storm business, so insurance, very familiar, right, with
Yeah.
that. And I worked in the company through college, just to kind of make ends meet off and on, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And so, but I knew like I didn't want to travel 8-9 months out of the year. It was a very nomadic career, and it was really good for our family, and I'm super grateful, that my dad did that and provided for us, and he did really well. But thinking about that, it's like, well, okay, if that's the business, and my perfect life consists of having kids, which I have 5 kids, getting married, being home, doing all that. Even if it could fund all of my life, it wouldn't allow me to live my life. So therefore, it wouldn't serve its purpose.
Yeah.
Right. And so I decided. So then I'm like looking around, like, okay, well, what could I do that would allow me to be here, have no cap on income, so I could still, fund all the things that I would want to do with my life. And so I kind of stumbled into real estate. My dad did real estate. He did commercial real estate investments and stuff, different things. I don't think he'd ever call himself a real estate investor. I never even heard that term.
Yeah.
To me, it was just a thing that he did. And so I stumbled on the investment world first. And my father-in-law, who was not my father-in-law at the time, I remember him. He was looking at a pre-foreclosure list. He was kind of looking into investing and all that stuff too. And I was over at Brittany's house, my girlfriend at the time. I was like, "What are you doing?" And he's looking at that list, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm looking at these houses." And I was like, "Are you moving?" Like I had no concept of this. And no, he's like, "No, you buy low, you sell it high, you fix it up, and then make a profit." And I thought, oh, I could do do that. Like that's really cool. I never heard. So I started digging into all the books that my dad had laying around the house. You know, Rich Dad Poor Dad. That was the first one.
Yep.
And I picked up Rich Dad Poor Dad. I'll never forget. I was sitting in my bedroom, and I read the whole thing cover to cover in one sitting. Like I did not put it down. I read the whole thing, and I was like, wow, like blew my mind.
Yeah.
And so then I read everything he had, and I started going to investment classes and seminars. And my first vision, I was like, oh, I saw these guys teaching investing, and I thought that's neat. Like they're doing investing, but then they're helping impact others. And I thought that was cool. So that was kind of like my first like career vision that I could do that. And so I did investing all through college. Started out interning with an investor, and then I started getting paid to just find deals. I was getting paid finder's fees, and wholesaling wasn't even a thing back then. They called it bird dogging. You know, if you read the old real estate books, you know, it'd be like, oh, and you might have made $1,000, $2,000 to
find that deal.
find a deal.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't anything like it is today. And so I was doing that, and then I ended up through college. My dad and I, he came to me. We ended up doing a lot of investment deals together. We bought like 30 houses in 2007.
Wow.
I was 21 at that time, so I had already started flipping houses, and then I was doing buy and hold deals. And our goal was just buy as many as we could, rent them out, pay them off over time, be set.
Yeah.
It was a good plan, but it was stressful because it was the recession.
Yeah.
You know, I got into the real estate when the market was still crazy good. You know, it was just nuts. All the, you know, just the bubble was being built. And then I saw a crash. And so we were limited to what we could do once it crashed, like how many loans we could get, all the different things. And we were putting money down, not my money. I didn't have any money, but his money.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing all of that. And I was doing everything. So so that's how it started. So we did all that. We learned a lot in that piece of it. My mentality was I'm young, so I could do all this, mess it all up, start all over if I have to. Like I just went for it, you know?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I did that. And then my friend, who was also my realtor, introduced me to the real estate agent world. And I ended up joining a brokerage, getting my license. And that was January 2009. So just in the thick of the mess, you know, why not? But it was funny, like telling people, I remember going to my wife and we can talk about this later, but just, you know, that conversation of, hey, I'm going to get my real estate license. Because I was trying to make a business out of investing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you couldn't make money back then. Like you couldn't flip a house if your life depended on it, you know, because nobody could get loans.
Yeah.
Everyone was scared of real estate. And
Yeah.
so then, yeah, the bright idea of getting my real estate license, like that was going to be any better.
Mhm.
And I remember people like feeling sorry for me when they found out I was getting my license. Like they're like, "Does your wife know? You know, do you need any money? Like, let me know when you go hungry." It was that type of thing. And so, but I got my license in 2009, and had a great first year, great career starting out, and I was an agent for about 4 years, then moved into leadership, and I started out as a coach and assistant team leader, then became team leader of that office, which was the number one. It was Keller Williams office. It was the number one Keller Williams in the world that I got to run, which is why I wanted to run it, because I thought, well, I'd like to own offices, so what a better way to get paid to learn how to run something
Right.
like that. And so, but it was the number one most profitable Keller Williams office in the world. Did over $1 billion a year in production.
Wow.
It was the first office to profit share $1 million back to their agents, and we did that I think 3 years in a row. You know, on those years after I was in there, and they did that right before I moved into leadership. So that was previous leadership that had helped there, and then I just had the opportunity to come in and keep that part going, which was fun.
Wow.
And then moved into regional leadership. Got to work, you know, with some of just the best real estate leaders in the country, in the world. You know, spent a couple days in a small room with Gary Keller for about a year when I was in regional leadership. Then through some course direction and changes, ended up actually stepping out of those roles by choice, and I moved back into the real estate team that I had. And so for the last 5 years, been running the brokerage. So that's kind of like the just progression of it all. But yeah,
Right.
it's been but it's all I've done is just is really real estate
Yeah.
and investing. I still invest.
That's
So,
awesome. I want to bring it back to the music side.
Yeah.
So you play guitar for your
Mhm.
church. You wanted to possibly go and be a professional musician.
Yeah.
What type of music were you into?
So in high school, I was in punk rock. You know, like that was what it was, and that was pretty much it. Like anything rock, punk rock for sure. You know, I loved all of that, just that style. So yeah, my my vision at the time, I was like, I'm gonna get signed to a record label, and as soon as I do, I'll get a lip ring and tattoos.
No.
And yeah, that was my
You with the lip ring?
Yeah. Oh, well, because everybody that was cool at that time I followed, they all had lip rings and full sleeve tattoos, and they played, you know, they toured for a living. That was
Did
it.
you get the
So
full sleeve?
I don't have any tattoos. Yeah. No piercings, no tattoos. So I didn't get into
Didn't pan
that.
out.
Yeah.
Who was your go-to band at that time?
Yeah.
So probably, because a lot of what I listened to was Christian rock. So
Yeah.
there was a band called MXPX.
Okay.
That was probably the number one. One
Yeah.
of the, you know, but I was into like a lot of the punk rock and ska, Supertones, MXPX. But I listened to all of it. So like the harder stuff, everything. Being a musician, like we, you know, played a lot of that. And then I listened to, you know, a lot of that, and then a lot of worship type stuff. So people, that's like, I would take my guitar everywhere I went. But then, you know, my family would be like, "Oh, can you play these songs?" I'm like, I don't know any of that stuff. Like, I can play I can play worship songs, or I can play punk rock songs. And like, that's about it. You know, you want me to play like old rock from the 70s or country songs? Like, I don't. To this day, I'm like, I don't know. You know, I could play it, but I don't know any of them. So yeah.
Do you have a favorite song that you love to play?
Ooh. Probably one of my favorite worship songs is it's a Hillsong called Hosanna. I love that song.
Yeah.
We play a lot of elevation worship, different things. There's a lot, but I like that song. I love the bridge of that song is by far one of my favorite just lyrics in music. And that lyric, there's a part in the bridge, and it's talking to God, but it says, "Break my heart for what breaks yours."
Yeah.
And I just love that piece, just to have and I started praying that way a few years ago, probably about, I don't know, it's been a while, 7 or 8 years ago, that I would see people the way God sees them, and I would love people the way God loves them.
Yeah.
And so, but that bridge always really resonated, you know, with me. I'm trying to remember the rest of the part, but anyway, but I love that song. I don't know if I like playing it, but you know, I like listening to it more. On that
It's just
piece,
one of your favorite songs.
Yeah.
So a music question: how's your improv? Are you pretty good?
Yeah, I mean, you know, everything we do is by ear, basically. You know, like we'll have sheet music and like I can't read sheet music, but I can see the chords and all that stuff. But that's all we did back when I was playing guitar. We couldn't look stuff up on the internet and how to play it, so we just had to listen to it
and figure it out
and just play it,
strum it out.
Yeah, but
That's
we
really cool.
recorded like a legit album.
Where is this album?
Why
is it
I
not
just
out?
had a copy in my truck, and I gave it to a buddy that wrote a song that was on the album. But I was 17. We finished it, so I had already we did it, produced it, real deal. Actual like cool. I mean the whole works. So yeah.
Did you write any songs?
Yeah, I wrote half the album. I think
Why?
on that.
Why is this not out to the world right now?
I wonder. Someone from church gave me some pictures. I don't think I have. Oh, look at this. Here they are. These are some pictures from like back in those days.
Waiting for the lip ring.
Yeah, I know, right? So there's the.
Oh,
that was about
let's go.
that was
The
about
spiky
the look,
hair.
Man, had the spiky hair, all the things. So
Oh my goodness.
It's funny.
a sweet lady in church was handing out photos from like her old, you know, like mission trips we used to play at and all that stuff. And she's like, "Hey, look at all these I found of you." So
That's
why I
awesome.
just got them this week. I had them in my
That is so
my
cool.
iPad.
I was about to say we were watching.
That was my high school life right there. Yeah.
We were watching episode 1, season 1 of Fear Factor the other day, and the clothes that they were wearing, I was like, "That's
Yeah,
it.
just
That's
the
it right
90s.
Oh
there."
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Can't believe my parents dressed me up in some of those clothes.
I know.
That was
So, do you still play for your church?
I do. Yeah.
You do.
I played this past weekend. So
Okay.
yeah, still play.
Awesome.
And so in high school I played like 6 or 7 times a week at like 3 or 4 different places. So
Right.
I played in 2 different youth groups, and It was funny because music, I tell people I've been doing worship, like music ministry for 25 years. Wow. And I don't talk about it a lot because it usually doesn't come up in these types of, business conversations.
Yeah.
But that is one of, like, I think has been like one of the secrets to our success, probably for Brittany and I both, because we've served in ministry all those years. And for me, like every time we serve, not just like, if you think of like giving financially, to me is like sowing seed, but also when you serve with your time, that's also sowing seed. Yeah. So I've had 25 years of, probably thousands of worship sets that I've played. And I've never been paid to play. Would never want to get paid to play. Yeah. Nothing wrong with that. But like, I just want my heart to be like, I'm here to serve. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And I remember when I was like 14, that was the first, like guitar, I was just obsessed with it. And I remember being at church, 14 years old. I don't even know how I knew how to pray like this, but I remember it was like, for me, it's like a calling. It wasn't just like, oh, it'd be a cool thing to do, and they need a guitar player, so I guess I'll play guitar. Yeah. Like, I felt called to like play guitar in church and to use that gift. And I remember praying, I told the Lord, I said, I gave it to him. I said, I'm going to give you this, and you do whatever you want with it. Mm-hmm. And as long as I'm playing guitar, as long as you want me to, I'll play for you. Like, I'll play in church. I'll serve you through this skill, right? Yeah. And I'd only been playing for maybe like 6 months at that time. But playing guitar, immediately like after that, so I had this like kind of gift, talent starting, and giving it to God and saying, you do whatever you want with this. Yeah. But I'm going to give it to you, right? And I'd never prayed like that before. I don't know that I'd ever, I do that in business now. We kind of look at it the same way. But that thing, immediately after, I got really good really fast, right? So, it just came real natural to me playing guitar. Yeah. And I was playing guitar at by my senior year in high school. I went to 2 different churches. I went to my main church on Wednesdays and Sundays. And that church does not exist now, but at the time I was playing there. Then I played Friday nights at our youth group with the church I go to now. At the time, the youth group was so big they had to do it on Fridays. So I stepped out of sports and I played Wednesday night, Friday night, Sunday. I played it at like a Tuesday night Bible study at a friend's church, just because I was there hanging out. I played 2 services for our chapels at school, and I played. And then I'd have a punk rock show at some point on a Saturday night usually, and we played probably 2 or 3 shows a week back then. So I was playing. This is all I did. I was like basically like full-time musician.
And you passed school.
It's barely, but I did pass. School was not my focus. I can tell you that. Yeah, I had a lot of fun in high school, and that's what we did. And it was, it was fun. But point of that is, so that was the one thing I remember. I can remember the night where I was when I prayed it, but God used that is how I met my wife. Right? Yeah. Met her on Friday nights. We met when we were 13, and the only reason I think she recognized me or knew me is because I played guitar. Right? Yeah. And
it was the hair.
It was the hair. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Our first date was her senior prom, and we went as friends. So we've been together literally ever since. Went to different schools, but her and her boyfriend broke up like 2 weeks before prom, which is like a nightmare for a girl. Senior year. They'd been dating for a long time, and I'd just been waiting for them to break up anyway. And so they broke up. She calls me, and I knew, like we all knew, Brittany needs a date to prom.
You're
like
just
her prom's
waiting.
coming up. Like we're like, who's it going to be? We don't know. So then I got the phone call, and I was like, and I was, and we need to teach some of these young kids this, because she calls me, she's like, what are you doing May 17th? And I was going to an MXPX concert. Like they were coming in town, and in high school, like I never knew what I was doing more than a week out other than a show, or I'm going to a show. Yeah. And like, so I knew like, well, May 17th, I got that. And I was like, well, I was going to go to an MXPX concert. And she was kind of crying on the phone. Like I could tell, like, this was hard, Yeah. And I was like, hey, can I call you right back? And I was hanging out at a buddy's house. She's like, yeah, that's fine. And so I didn't want her to ask me to prom. Like, what girl wants to ask a guy to prom, Mm-hmm. So I knew what she was calling. So I hung up the phone, and then I called her right back, and then I asked her to prom. I asked her to her prom. I was like, hey, Brittany, will you go to your prom with me? And so I took her to prom, and literally, yeah, we've been together ever since that night. But
that was smooth right
Wow.
there. That was
See
really
what I did there?
Y'all need to write that down right
I did
there.
right there.
Yeah.
I tell these, I would have shamed these young guys back if there was Facebook and social media back then to get the stuff I did, for her in those times. I was a romantic for sure.
What do you have to say about that? 'Cause
Hey.
I know a girl asked you to prom.
Well, I didn't want to go to prom with anybody. I was
He wasn't gonna
perfectly
go.
fine. I didn't go to prom until my senior year. I had the opportunities to go the other years, but I
Yeah.
was like, there was nobody. I hadn't met her yet. So
See, there
if
you
I would have
go.
met her, then
You
I
would've
would have asked her to prom.
You'd have been interested for sure.
But I
Right.
mean, yeah, this girl, she was like, I hope she's not listening to this. She probably isn't. But she was like, I want you to ask me to prom while you're emceeing one of our pep assemblies. And I was like, no.
Just because you asked.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And then she was like, you want to go to prom? And I was like, sure. I mean, okay. So,
Cold-hearted.
Yeah, it was.
Cold-hearted.
Yeah, prom.
so
But it was fun. Like we went to prom, and her prom was, she went to a public school in Fort Worth, so it was at Texas Motor Speedway.
oh,
So
That's
it was
where
really
ours were.
neat.
It was a
Was
big-
it
it
really?
was a
Yeah,
big deal.
Arlington High.
Wow.
Kick 'em. Class of 2014.
Our one of our dating anniversaries, I picked her up. We were married, but I picked her up in a cool car, and I got us back. Like, I called the Texas Motor Speedway to have dinner there. And like, well, you got to be a member. And I was like, well, let me tell you the story. And they're like, okay, we'll get you in. And so we
Aw.
went. I took her back to the same restaurant, the same
Wow.
place, and we had
Yeah.
dinner that night at Texas Motor Speedway. And there was a prom happening the same night we were there, so that was just kind of cool.
Classic.
I think
That's
we'd already
super
been
cool.
married for like 10 years at that point when I did that.
Wow.
date,
I need to
but,
start writing this down.
But
Yeah.
so I met my wife, right, playing
Yeah.
guitar. I got into real estate technically because of if it weren't for playing guitar in church, I really probably wouldn't have been hanging out with her. Wouldn't have been. I met my one of my best friends and realtor. He and I played in the band together. I met him through playing guitar because
Wow.
he starts playing in the band. I find out he's a real estate agent. I'm wanting to do investing stuff and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's the one that went and helped me. And he's still in the business. He's one of the top agents in probably the country. And he's the one that got me into Keller Williams. So I wouldn't have gotten to Keller Williams if it weren't for him. And so, and then just a lot of things. But I looked at like all this cool stuff that happened in my life, personally, professionally. I can connect it all back to if
Playing
I hadn't
guitar.
been playing guitar in church and
Yeah.
doing what I.
Right.
So it's like the Lord took the one thing I gave him and said, hey, do whatever you want
Yeah.
with this. And he used that to really shape the rest of my life. And so I think like, I'm forever indebted to him anyway. But like, I think like, well, what if I hadn't been playing
Obedient.
guitar and
Yeah,
doing that? Like,
obedient
what
in
would
that.
my life look like today?
Wow.
I have no idea what I would be doing. So,
Yeah.
so it's pretty. I've never shared that story before publicly, I don't think, but
That's so cool.
That's how it all kind of happens. So,
Yeah. I think the
Wow.
obedience aspect of you giving that up and just
Mhm.
like, hey, this is yours. If you want to take it, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
But that's just so cool, just walking in faith. And then the fact that you did that at 14
yeah,
years
Yeah.
old.
14.
I can tell you I wasn't thinking about that at 14 years old.
I don't know how I was, but I was in a great church and I had a great youth pastor.
Yeah.
I was getting taught some cool things.
Yeah.
But I knew I wanted to do that. So I was like, well, if I'm going to do it, like I couldn't see me not doing it for the Lord, right?
Yeah.
But it was cool how he honored that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
He used that. And I think we've had a blessed life, but I think, man, I mean, I can't, like I said, thousands of probably worship services that
Mhm.
I've done that
Yeah.
I've given my time. That's just one of the ways that we serve.
Yeah.
But it's neat how he's honored that, used that, and it's I look back on it, I'm like, man, super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the aspect you talked about serving with your spouse as well.
Yeah,
We served in our church and we served on a mission trip last summer. And I was always the guy, like, if I didn't have Gracie, like, I'm fine. I can go serve. Like, it doesn't bother me.
Sure.
But I didn't realize how much more impactful it was to actually serve with your spouse. And
huge.
that was super cool to experience. And
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed serving with her more.
Yeah, it's neat. And you're doing that together. It's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. So let's switch gears and
Okay.
kind of go into your investing days.
Okay.
And just some advice, because I know I've spoken to a lot of people who are like, well, it's too late to start like investing. We missed the boat on that, or like it's too hard now to get into, or
Sure.
all of these things. So what would you say to someone who wants to get into investing? Is there still a chance that they can succeed at that?
That's a good
Or,
question.
what would you recommend for them
Yeah.
if they want to go down that path?
I think what's funny about just hearing those limiting beliefs,
Yeah.
is that people have been saying that for 50 years, right?
Yeah.
Oh, they missed it. It's like, well, you didn't miss it. Like if you look back, you just look at property values over 30, 40 years, they've
Yeah.
just done nothing but go up.
Yeah.
Even in the recession, especially in North Texas, right?
Yeah.
It always bounces back. Like if you had bought real estate at the peak of the last market, in the early 2000s, right? Let's say 2006, 2007, right before it crashed, when everything was at the top. If you had bought then and then you went through the crash, you had thought you missed it, right? So for me, like my brain's more long term, always
Right.
is, right? Short term, you can get your head handed to you sometimes. Sometimes the timing, where like a couple years ago, rates went up. There were a lot of people that had bought right before that happened, flipping, and then it kind of got, they were used to selling houses in a day, and then it's like, and it might take you 2 or 3 months. But if you have 10 or 15 houses that you have to sit on for 3 times longer than you thought, like that's a lot of overhead. Like that can take someone out. But
Right.
long term, if you had done that back in 2006 and 7, you would have probably tripled your investments by today, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, that really wasn't that long ago. It's
Yeah.
15, 18 years ago now.
Yep.
And so that's not a long time to triple your investment. It's huge. My first year as an agent, the average price in Arlington, Texas was $145,000.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I should have just bought every listing I had, and sat on. Like that would have just worked, know. And so I don't invest to speculate. I don't speculate when I invest. Like it's got to be a good deal. Make your
Right.
money when you buy. But I would encourage people to just get in the game, you
Yeah.
know. And one deal builds on another, builds on another, builds on another, and then you're going to learn every single deal that you do too. I've never really, I don't think, lost money on an investment. I've broken even. I've worked
Yeah.
for minimum wage on several, Like by
Yeah.
the time it was done, I was like, I could have flipped burgers and made more money
Mm-hmm.
than what I did on this house. But I
Yeah.
learned a lot, right? So for those people, I'd say there's never a bad time
Yeah.
to get in.
Yeah.
And it's like, what else are you going to do with your money?
Right.
And I'd say save money. People that think they missed it, they didn't. And then also save money, have reserves. That's a big thing. Most
Mhm.
people go in with all they've got, and that's okay. I mean, I've been there and I've done that. However, if you could have some reserves set
Mhm.
aside, and you're not investing with emergency money, and you're investing excess on top of that, it's really not a lot of risk involved. And if
Yeah.
you
Right.
buy it right and you hold on to it long enough, even if you didn't buy the best deal in the world, it's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
The office building we just bought that we're in now, I could not have bought that had it not been for a little rental property in Arlington I bought at the end of 2019. So I used that property, sold it as the down payment for that building,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and see, everybody wants to do the big deal.
Yep.
But
Right.
they're not willing to just do the little boring deals
Yeah.
that lead
That
up
lead
to
up
the big deals. And I didn't know at the time when I was buying that little deal for like $140,000 that would lead into buying this, big commercial property and all that. I had no idea. It's
Yeah.
sometimes hard to connect the dots,
Yeah.
And so you just
Mhm.
have to I just encourage people to get in the game, read a lot, learn a lot,
Yeah.
get in the right circles, and and there's a ton of free knowledge out there.
Yeah.
YouTube.
YouTube's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Podcast.
Yeah. Podcast.
Podcasts.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Audiobooks.
didn't have any of that. I
Yeah.
was just, that was just, I don't even think YouTube was a thing yet. That was just
Mhm.
starting to,
Yeah.
and there was nothing free hardly back then. So, you had, and I spent thousands of dollars on classes and stuff that's now free. And then I teach twice a month at our office.
Yep.
You've been to some of
Yeah.
that. Free investing, wealth building classes to just say, okay, here's what we've learned, here's our experience, and then teach other people. 'Cause a lot of people just don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't know
Yeah.
what you don't know.
I've learned a lot going to those classes, even being in the industry. I have a better step ahead than a lot of people, but I've learned a lot in those classes, a lot of really good aha
Glad
moments.
to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
you mentioned books,
Mhm.
reading. What is one book that you would tell somebody to read if they want to invest?
I think first one's got to be Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah.
And I didn't read that book as a teenager. I thought it was for dads, so it was not. That was a dad book, And I read the book and I was like, oh, so it's for anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Women, men, It's Kiyosaki talking about he had his real dad who grew up in the normal educational advice world of go to college, get a job, safe, secure job. That's how they always say it. And, put money aside into a retirement fund and you can retire when you're 65. And that's what the whole, and I remember my dad telling me.
It's the American dream.
It is, right?
Yeah.
And my dad, when I grew up, he was a business owner his whole life. And he would always tell me college is overrated and you don't need to go, And I remember being like 10 years old probably. And we were leaving my grandma's house. I'll never forget. That like my dad, sometimes your parent, they look at you in the rearview mirror and like they just adjust it and they're looking right at you and they stare into your soul. It was one of these moments. And he was worked up about something. I don't know, probably a conversation he had just had. And he's like, he's telling me at 10 years old, don't plan to go to college out of state because I'm not going to pay for that. and he's like, college is overrated anyway, and I'm sitting there like, how am I going to get a job? I didn't know. Like, that's all he told me. I'm like, that was it. There was no lesson after that. And I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and that's when I was like, oh, I get everything my dad, he'd always talked about owning your own business.
Yeah.
And college is overrated. And he'd also say that the decisions you make today could affect your life forever. He drilled that into me, And so those are probably the three things I would take away. If I wrote a book and talked about things I learned from my dad, it would just be those 3 points right there. But I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and all of a sudden, like, the world made sense because now Kiyosaki's talking about buying assets to pay for your liabilities.
Yeah.
And an asset is not what most of the world is taught, right? An asset's something that puts money into your pocket every month, right? Cash flow. And so I think first, like, you have to before you get into the nuts and bolts of investing, have an understanding. And I teach my classes like this, like, you have to have a why behind what you're doing, And so you got to understand why it matters, what's the long-term implications of all of that, And so that'd be the book. And then I'd go from there. I'd read Cash Flow Quadrant, which is like the unofficial sequel of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which nobody's hardly read. If I get in a room and I say, who's read Rich Dad, Poor Dad? Everybody raises their hand.
Yeah.
Like 90% of the room. And I say, who's read Cash Flow Quadrant? And maybe one hand goes up. But Cash Flow Quadrants, he starts getting even deeper into the nuts and bolts. So I'd start with those, probably those two.
Right.
That's really good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So now let's talk a little bit about your leadership because you mentioned that now you're in a leadership role. You have been for many years.
Yeah.
So give us some insight into all of the leadership that you've taken on and how you've been able to help influence people to get to where you are now.
Yeah.
Sure.
Also, on that dovetail on that, was leadership something that was natural to you, or did you have to learn that?
I had to learn it, right? Everybody, I think it's, John Maxwell says leaders, they say are they born leaders, and he's like, well, everybody's born, but there's not like a natural born leader. We just learn, It's definitely learned. I learned really being in music and in ministry at a young age. That's when I first started understanding the concept of leadership. And I remember my youth pastor, getting on to me because I did something I shouldn't have done. He told me not to do it. I did it anyway. Like all good youth pastors, he found out, right? I just went and saw a movie that he had heard was not good, and we thought it was funny, so we went and saw it anyway. I wasn't even old enough to see it. It was just a stupid comedy, but it was definitely inappropriate. I mean, I knew when I was watching it, like, oh, this is not good.
Yeah.
And I remember him scolding me. One day after lunch, we went out to eat. He was taking us home. I couldn't even drive. Dropped my buddy off. As soon as my buddy got out of the car, he's like, I got to talk to you. And I was like, oh, man, that's not good. I didn't know that was coming. And then he told me that. And he's like, if Pastor knew you'd seen that, like, you wouldn't be playing in the band. And he said, you are an example because you're on stage, you're in front of everybody. He said, whatever you do, if we allow you to be in leadership and you're also doing these things, he said, you're making that okay for everybody else, right? People are going to, like it or not, people are going to justify their behavior based on what they see the leaders doing.
Yeah.
And that was my first, like, real big lesson in leadership. I thought, oh, crap, like what I'm doing has an impact on other people, right? And so I can't just act however I want to act. I can't just do whatever I want to do, you know? And that really is what kept me out of a lot of trouble growing up, right? Because I always had all these other teenagers on my brain. You know, my Friday night youth group had around 300 teenagers in it.
Wow.
And so, and you know, and we were the leaders, right? People were looking at us. People were making decisions on that. And I think we have to remember that, not just as believers, but business owners, right? How many people, they're one way at work, they're one way at home, and they're a different way at church, right?
Yeah.
And they're a different way with, like, you can't do that. So leadership is really like, who are you when nobody's looking? Who are you? You know, for me, I would hope that people would say, I'm the same at home as I am at work, as I am at church. Like, if you know me, I am what I am, you know, and you get what you get. And it's, but the standard does not drop, right? And so that was my first lessons in leadership. So that carried over. So I think I feel like even before business, I've been in leadership since then, right? As soon as I got put into a place of being able to influence others and lead others, you know, I was there. So that carried into business. So even before I had the title of leadership, in my head, I was already leading, right? I was already helping. And my first year, I was the second place rookie of the year for the entire world in Keller Williams in 2009.
Wow.
And I was the regional #1 rookie in North Texas, New Mexico, Memphis. So immediately I had a lot of eyeballs on me. And so I was always teaching classes and helping. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, look, if you want to be a leader, be a leader. You don't wait till the leadership comes. You don't wait till the title comes. You know, a lot of people are like, well, when I get the promotion, then I'll dress the part and then I'll act the part. And then that's not how it works, right? You've got to, we teach a concept called be, do, have, right? Before you can have whatever it is that you want, you've got to do it. And before you can do it, you've got to be it. You've got to be that person that is qualified to have the things that you want to have. And everybody always just goes, well, I want to have that. And when I have it, I'll do it. When I do it, I'll be that, right? When I have money, I'll be, you know, I'll think like that person, you know, and that's just not, it's totally backwards, right? Yeah. And so, so I started acting the part then. I was teaching classes and encouraging other people, and someone needed help, I was helping them. And then I learned more about leadership in those years that I was at KW than I could have. I mean, I don't know how I could have gained that much experience anywhere else. It was so valuable. But we always teach everything rises and falls on leadership, right? And organizations, same thing. You look at an organization that lasts, right? Not like a flash in the pan success, but something that's built to last for 10, 20, 30 years or generations, right, to come. And you could have the best systems, you could have the best lead generation model, you could have all of that. You could even have the best people working in the company. But if the leadership lacks, right, the organization's never going to rise higher than the leader's ability to lead. Yeah. Right? So if they're on a scale of 1 to 10, if they're a 5 leader, that organization's never going to go above a 5. Right? John Maxwell teaches a lot about that. So so it was interesting. But the thing I was most interested in learning, getting into, that was the leadership part. So I thought if I can learn leadership, that'll go into everything, you know, else that we're doing.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
So I think I remember when you were going through the process of kind of going higher up as in Keller Williams, you had kind of a goal that you wanted to be something, and then it can just completely change. Yeah. And you went back to doing a team, and you ended up starting your own brokerage and everything. Right. What was that goal, and what transpired from basically getting super high up into a company that everybody would have loved to have, and then kind of, I guess, from the world's perspective, it looked like you kind of just sailed off into the sunset and didn't do much. What was that like?
That was interesting for sure. And I got to answer that carefully because I don't ever want to say anything that would come off, you know, negative about, because the whole career I had there, I'm nothing but grateful for. Yeah. However, what happens when, like, my goal was to really own businesses and own offices and franchises and all of that. And that's why I thought at the time when I got into the role, everybody that had done that did the path I was on, right? And I was getting about as high as you could get. That was like my next steps in the company without actually going and working, in the C-suites of the corporate, part of the company. And so that was my goal. I was like, I want to own brokerages and wanted to do all of that. And really for me, like I still had a good 10, 15 years left before I could ever even see myself ejecting, from the world there. And I got out of alignment. I really was looking at like, okay, well, what do I want to do for the next 10 or 15 years? And the direction I wanted to go did not line up with the direction that I was seeing, the company go. Good, bad, or indifferent. We just weren't in alignment anymore, right? And so, and I didn't feel like I could build what I really wanted to build, what I had in my heart to build, and do it the way I wanted to do it, because and that's fine. That's how businesses are. There's models, and you have to stay within the model. But you get away from the model, then it just doesn't work, and then it's like, well, what am I here for, right? And so, so I did. Like I did not know, and this is, if it's okay to mention this, I think it is. Like for like 2 years, I didn't have any peace about the direction, but I didn't have any other direction to go. Like I didn't know the answer. I didn't know where. I'm like, I've gotten this far. And there's been no other doors open. Never saw myself going back into selling real estate. Like I was so far removed from the job of being an agent at that point. That was almost like, really was like starting over back at square one. And so, but there's a verse. It's Proverbs 19:21. It says, "Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it's the Lord's purpose that prevails." And so I kind of went back to my 14-year-old prayer of, okay, God, like these are my plans. This is what I'd like to do. And so far, every door open to get there had been opened, right? But I didn't have peace, right? And I knew something was like just not right for me. And so I prayed that way. I said, whatever your purpose is for my life, that's what I want. But you got to show it to me. So in the meantime, I'm going to work my plan here that I feel like you've led me to all these years. And but if your purpose and plan is different, that's what I want. Show it to me, and that's what I'll do. And I'd gotten my answer on, it was a Friday afternoon. Monday, I had the meeting of meetings, the one I had worked towards for 10 years, where I was going to have my opportunity to take over some offices. That was coming on a Monday. Friday afternoon, I saw what I needed to see. I got my answer, and I was plain as day. And I knew in 5 minutes I was done. I told the guy with me at the time, he was doing some social media work for me, one of my best friends. And I saw a couple of things, and I had just the insight, and I was like, I'm done. I was like, I said, I just saw what I needed to see. And he didn't know I was even looking. I went home to my wife, told her, I'm going to resign and turn down. If the meeting goes the way that we wanted it to go, I'm going to have to turn those down. I turned down 3 offices, and then I resigned from my position. And not because of the people that were there. Like I love the people that I was working with and working for. It was bigger than that, right? And so, so I had no safety net. Only thing I had was a real estate license and my team, which at the time had like 1 house under contract, and I had not worked my database for 6 years. I had not done a listing appointment, a buyer appointment. I told my wife, I said, well, I'm going to see if all the stuff I've been coaching and teaching actually works, I knew it did. But I literally, so that meeting happened that Monday morning. I wasn't in it, and then the meeting went the way we thought it would, and I had to then at that point turn it down and then resign.
That's insane.
Within 60 days, I was back full time with my team. I transitioned slowly, so they didn't just show me the door. But I think that was just years of trust, and they believed that I'm leaving. I wasn't getting recruited away, and I stayed for 2 more years at the company before I went, just so they knew I'm not going anywhere else. Like I left for the reasons that I left for, And yeah, but I don't. There was a lot of unknown. I don't know that I was scared, because I knew I was doing what for me was the right thing to do, and I knew that it was. I knew it was very clearly like this is where the Lord was taking me in business. But at the same time, you're walking away from guaranteed 6 figures and salaried position, and all the opportunities literally were at my fingertips. And that was a 10-year thing I'd worked towards. But I had more peace about it than anything. I was more stressed about what I was going to eat for lunch than I was that decision. Total peace. And it was the best, even though like it would have been a really scary thing. You're leaving this big career and this opportunities and all the stuff you work towards. But it was the best thing that's ever happened. And like our net worth, the business, like now I'm leading a business that like I can be me, I can show up, I can lead the way I want to lead. And we've attracted people that are of like mind with that because of the vision and the mission that we have in the business. So it's been awesome.
That's so
I
cool.
think I'm, now financially way better off, net worth way better off. In a very, in a 5-year period, more than I could imagine has happened in the last 5 years. So it's like, the Lord's also made it up to me. I've worked hard, very diligently in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we always say, like, look, God's not going to do your part, and you can't do God's part, right? But you got to do your part, right? So we've worked at that; it hasn't just happened. But yeah, so it's been good. But that's kind of how it went. That was what was, But I never had a, like I all I had to do was just figure out, okay, well, what is. To me, that was just a vehicle, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talked a lot about and I know we'll get there, but just story and identity and all those things. I never looked at it as more than a vehicle. At the time, that was a vehicle to help me fund my perfect life. But that was not who I was, And I liked it. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the impact that I felt like I got to make while I was there. Thousands of people I got to meet. I mean, there were times I was on stage in front of 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 people at one time. And I felt like maybe that's part of why I was there, was to be like, I always wanted to. Part of my personal mission statement is to leave people better off than they were before knowing me or spending time with me. And that's worked its way into our team's mission statement, to elevate people to a better place. That's part of, I have one long run-on sentence in my mission statement. I don't know why. For me, it has to be in one sentence or it doesn't work. But it's really like 6 sentences. I just put a lot of commas.
Hey, you hear that? I'm a comma person.
Good.
My grammar is not good. Anytime I feel that there needs to be a comma, I throw it in
Just
there.
throw it in there.
I
got commas. I just put commas for fun, I'm like, and I don't spell very well either. So like, I got a list of stuff on my phone. I can't tell you how many times I've probably looked up like when to use a comma. So our mission statement is pretty lengthy, and my team laughs about it. So you can't say it in one breath. But it's about elevating people to a better place. Part of it is that, and that we would honor God in everything that we do. That's the end of it. So that was my goal. So I thought even while I was there, like my goal was like, if I'm going to be here, like my impact, I want to leave these people better off than before. And like you ever get a phone call from someone, you're having a good day, and then by the time that phone call's done, you're just like, man, they just sucked it out of me, right?
Yes.
I never wanted to be that guy. So from a young, like I always wanted to, like, you were glad you took my phone call. Like like if I'm 5 minutes, my goal is, and that 5 minutes is to elevate you to a better place than you were before that 5 minutes started. Or if we're friends for the rest of our life, I don't want you to be like, I would have been better off not knowing that guy. Like I just didn't want to be that guy, right? And so my whole team, like that's the goal that we're pushing out every day. But see, that's part of leadership too, right? 'Cause that's the vision for us. Part of the mission, is serving people and stewarding over what we've been blessed with and elevating people to a better place and giving unreasonable hospitality. All this stuff is worked into our mission. And so it's like, if we all do that every day with each other and with our clients and with, like, how could we not get where we want to go and help get other people where they want to go. So I
Yeah.
felt like while I was at KW, I could do that. But that was I already had the mission. I already knew like who I was and what I was supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So when that left, my brain just went to like, okay, if God still wants me to have a big impact, I just have to find a different vehicle to do it. So I've been like on the last 5 years kind of, and right now it's just been like, I'm just going to do my thing and I'm going to run the brokerage as well as it can be ran. And I don't know what the next step is. I don't know where God's going to say, hey, if he wants me to go make an impact on 1 million people or thousands of people, I don't know. Maybe it's just my family and the small group around me, and they will go impact, like my son through the nonprofit we run.
Yeah.
I've thought, well, maybe, there's the legacy right there. Like, it's not about me going and doing it. So I don't know, but I did know, like, I need, if that's what God wants me to do, and I've told my team a lot. I'm like, I could, a couple people on my team, someone was asking me, I was talking about business models and business plan, and he was like, well, if we hit that, like, how much would you make? And I said, I could probably still make more as an individual agent.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to be just an individual agent.
Yeah.
If I could do this, even if I made the same amount of money or maybe just a little bit more, but I could help 10 or 20 people also go do it, I'd rather do that. That's more fulfilling to me. Like, I get more excited about getting out of bed, adding value to others and doing that than just if it was just about the money, right?
Yeah.
So it's a vehicle, and I look at all of that as that piece. So it was weird for a little bit, but I just knew, like, well, if God wants me to go do all of that again and influence people and teach, he'll open up another door, for me to do that. That's why I love doing, if I get asked to do a podcast, I'm like, yeah, cool. It's another opportunity to maybe help somebody.
Yeah.
Right.
So you mentioned that you had that secondary prayer and basically saying, like, God, I want you to, lead me. Where do you want me to go? Was that, you said, kind of like a 2-year period of trying to figure that out, or that was quickly
2
that?
years. I prayed that for 2 years. I don't know that I always kind of prayed in that way, but like I found that verse and just really stuck with that. But it was like 2 years. 2 years I didn't really have peace. Yeah. And I just didn't, it was just the future was real fuzzy, which was kind of weird because usually, we think we got it all figured out, but I could just tell, like, I don't know. Like, I had this unsettling feeling that where I was going was not going to be what I thought where I was going, but I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
I didn't see any other better vehicle at the time.
Yeah.
But it did not happen like that.
What would you say? Yeah. What would you say to somebody who's in that period of waiting? Because, I mean, we've experienced that. There's, I'm sure, plenty of people who have experienced that. And what kept you going during that time of the waiting, really?
Yeah. I think that's when you have to trust in God. You have to just sometimes in those periods, a lot of people will want to quit, and I didn't until I had my answer. Mm-hmm. But I think it's about, I mentioned peace. Yeah, we follow the peace, and if you're married, I think you both have to follow the peace. Like, you have to be in agreement, right? And now, and Brittany and I, if she doesn't have a peace about it and I do, then we don't do it. And the times I haven't, like, I've gone against that rule, it never turned out good. So if I don't have a peace about that, and I'm like, well, I do, it's fine. And I do it, and it was always money related, and it always turned out terrible. And she was gracious. She never was like, I told you so. She might have, but I dismissed it, But I think you follow the peace. So for me, like, I didn't have peace about leaving yet. I didn't have any other thing to go do. So I just stayed and I waited and but in the meantime, I did the best. I was working to be the best that I could be. Yeah. And do the best, so I was still focused on growing. I was still focused on the role. I mean, I moved from one role to a bigger leadership role where I was in the regional role, and I was like the leadership for the leadership of all the companies. So we oversaw 35 franchises. So the team leaders and the owners of those offices and things, I was like leadership support for them. Mm-hmm. And so, but that happened within the 2 years that I still didn't know. So I just kept showing up every day, doing my best. I remember one of the guys I looked up to at KW. His name was Mike Brody. Dear, still friend. I love him. And when I was really struggling, probably in like 2011, after I'd been in the business for a couple of years, I remember I had hit the wall kind of financially. Just overhead got too high, things were slow. I mean, we were just scraping the bottom of the economy at that point. And he was meeting with me, and I had all these dreams to go do this stuff, and he didn't know I was. He may have, but he didn't know I was struggling. Right? I was at a point where I was like flat broke. Had a newborn. My oldest was born like a few months before that meeting. But I remember him telling me, he's like, hey, because he's like, what are your dreams? What are your goals? What do you want to do? And I was like, well, I want to do what you're doing. You know, I want to own offices. I want to be able to go speak at places and, you know, all this stuff. And he said, what I would do is you show up every day, you do your very best. He said, put your head down. That's what he said. Show up every day, put your head down, do your very best at where you're at right now. And he said, and the tap on the shoulder will come. And to me, like that tap on the shoulder is different for everybody, right? Could have been the next promotion, next job opportunity, the next investment deal, whatever it was. And so for me, what I knew was, well, I need to go back because I was in like a mode of, well, should I quit? Should I go do something else? Like I got to provide for my family and this isn't working out. I was selling stuff. I sold a guitar amp. I sold a watch. Actually, I pawned a watch twice. One time I just didn't go back and get it because I just didn't have the money to do it. You know, nobody knew this. Mm-hmm. I'm still like teaching people how to do this thing. I remember I was on a top rookies panel at our national convention without a watch on because it was at the pawn shop so I could make payroll, right? So this is stuff nobody knows. Yeah. And everybody sees all this, like, oh, they're just killing it. They've never had a problem, never, you know, and I was having cash flow problems. Never got behind on anything, but I also was not willing to get behind. I was like, I will sell everything to stay on top of stuff. But I remember then, so he, because of the way that the deal worked with how they counted my rookie year, I wasn't on that panel, which was my goal to be on that panel. My first month in real estate was like, I'm going to be on the top rookies panel at our national convention. And I was able to be on that. Well, Mike facilitated that panel. So he was like, hey, when we get back in town, because he was local too, he's like, let's get together. So he had no idea I was in like a really rough spot financially. You know, I was just faking it. And I felt like such a fraud. Even though I knew what I was talking about, it didn't make me a bad agent. And I think that's what people need to remember. But if you don't manage your finances, like you could be a great real estate agent or a great business person, but if you don't manage your finances, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how good you can sell. It doesn't matter how good your listing presentation is. Like you got to take care of business, right? And but he said that, and he said, then tap on the shoulder will come. So I just put my head down, and I got the business back in gear that year. The next year, I really doubled down on working my database and Sphere and what that, you know, was where all my business was coming from. And I doubled the business that year. And actually, I doubled it in 9 months. I doubled anything I'd ever done in the few years before that. And then the tap on the shoulder came that fourth quarter, and I moved into leadership after that. Just 18 months from me sitting on the couch wondering if I should get a job or quit, right? Mm-hmm. And so fast forward to the leadership days. Again, I'm in a spot of like, well, what do I do? I don't see another alternative. So I just put my head down and I did my very best but that time it was a God tap, right? Yeah. It wasn't a man saying, hey, here's your next opportunity. It was God tapping my shoulder and saying, here's the next thing. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, I did the best job that I could do in that opportunity that I had. Mm-hmm. I didn't quit. I didn't go do 500 different jobs, other opportunities. I stayed with what I had until I knew this is the next step, and then I did that. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so, but it's a lot of waiting. It's a lot of prayer. It's
That's amazing.
You know, and even
probably really good support from your wife too.
Oh yeah. She stood by me through all that, and I don't think she even knew how bad it was sometimes until I was like, hey, But I remember being at the pawn shop, so embarrassing. But like, you know, I had a full-time assistant, had to get paid, you know, and she was gracious with me too. She'd go a month and a half without a paycheck, you know. She'd be like, "Hey, you think I can get paid?" Be like, "Yeah, I got to figure that out." You know, look at the bank account. What can I sell today? Thankfully, I had a few things that were worth something I could sell. Wow. And you know, so she was gracious. My wife was gracious, and yeah, but that was a crazy time. But see, if I had quit, if I had given up, then I would have never gotten to be in leadership. Would have never. But see, I remember thinking when I wanted to quit, I was already thinking about, and this is what most people I think miss when I talked about big whys earlier. You have a big why. I already had a vision. Like I had already seen myself owning offices, teaching. I had goals. I wanted to be, you know, by my last couple of years in leadership at our national conventions, I taught every time there was a time slot for a class. I was teaching. I was on main stage. I was doing all of that. But I remember when I was on my couch thinking, you know, feeling sorry for myself and not knowing if I should stay in real estate or not. It's like, well, you know, nobody's going to want to hear from a guy that quit real estate. Talk about real estate, right? Talk about leadership. And so that's what kept me from quitting. Wow. Because I knew if I quit now, I'll never get to do that. I'll never make the impact that I feel like is in my heart to go make. Yeah. And you know, all the hundreds and thousands of people that I've gotten to train and impact and influence, and you know, none of that would happen if I quit. So I just got my butt in gear and went back to work. And you know, I was like, I have to be a productive agent, and I got to run a productive team before I can have the leadership piece, before anybody would ever want to hear what I have to say. But if I had not had the vision to want to go do all of that, I would have quit. I would have just got a job. I could make money. I could go do whatever and go. I sell cars or sell roofs or go do whatever. Yeah. But I just stuck with it.
That's amazing. So you've talked about the highs of being super high up in Keller Williams, and then I didn't even know that story about the lows that you were talking about, where a lot of people see themselves through all those peaks and valleys and in between. Where have you kept your identity to be able to push you through in those moments and not giving up and not seeing, you know, being obedient in those moments and seeing the blessings that the Lord has had for you at the end of those peaks and the end of those valleys?
Right. Yeah, it's a great question. So for me, you know, my identity, like you could take everything away, right? To me, I'm still a son of God, right? My identity is in Christ and in my salvation. And so it's like if you took my, you know, I mean, just take it all, take everything away. Nobody can take that. That's the one thing, unless you let them, nobody can ever take. So at the end of the day, it's like I'm grateful. You know, I wake up grateful because I know where I'm going, and I know who's in charge, and I know who I work for. You know, and that's who I work for at the end of the day. And so I know He's got me, right? And the Bible talks about, Jesus said, right, in Matthew 6 and 6:33 specifically, right, seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. So we're not supposed to go chase the things and the titles and the positions and the money and nothing bad of any of that. And I mean, Jesus said, you know, houses, brothers, sisters, mothers, all of these things. He said, if you leave, He said, you will not fail to receive 100 times in this present age. So He didn't say all that's bad, but what He did say was don't chase it, right? He said that's what pagans do. Yeah. And I read that passage almost every day. It could be every day. I miss a day here and there, but like in my prayers and confessions that I have all written out, which is all scripture-based, I have a few verses at the top, and that whole section of Matthew 6 is there as just to get me in the right mode in the beginning of the day. Like I am seeking God and His plan, His purpose above everything. Yeah. And if I do that, all the other stuff can happen. And money, you know, money is good for the good it can do, right? We can never have enough money for all the good that it could do. Yeah. Nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with a title. Leadership is a great thing, right? You got to, but it's like, how do you steward over it? Are you using that position for yourself, for your own self-gain, or are you using it for the kingdom, right? I always wanted to be an example of somebody who lived the Christian life and still succeeded and never had to compromise on my values and my beliefs and my morals. And I wanted to prove it could be done.
Yeah.
And I think if there was any reason I was in the positions that I was, it was for that. And I remember getting to that high level, being down and, getting to go to corporate and being in a room for 2 days with Gary. And I remember one of the leaders down there in Austin that was in charge of a big division came up to me, and she'd kind of given me a side hug. And she said, I'm so glad you're here. She said, they need to see what you've done and how you've done it. And to me, that was like a confirmation, that I don't have to go party and do all these things and be someone I'm not to get something materialistic.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I didn't. I would hope people could look back and say, never saw him be someone different, right? Because that's an identity thing.
Yeah.
Because then I think, well, no, my identity is in Christ. If I have to go have an identity that relates to all these other people that are doing whatever they do, thinking that they have to do this or go to that party or go do this thing to get in that room, I actually proved that you didn't have to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I stuck with my true identity, which was who I was as a believer first, right? And it goes all the way back to Pastor Mike and that advice that I'd gotten when I messed up when I was 14, 15 years old, was they're always watching you. People are making decisions on what you do based on how you live your life. And so for me, I'm like, well, I don't want to be the typical person that went up the corporate ranks and compromised everything to get there, right? Because when you do that, now it's selfish gain.
Yeah.
But I believe God honored it because my focus was always to be an example for him. So if he put me in front of thousands of people, I was going to make sure I represented well. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I've always looked at him as he's the boss, right? And this is a vehicle, right? And I'm a steward over that vehicle as well as possible. So it didn't matter if the vehicle changed. You can sell your car, buy a new car. Yeah. You're still the one, right? In it. It doesn't matter. So that would be it. So my identity is there for sure. And anything else that we're doing, to me, is a conduit or an opportunity to help other people, influence other people. And you never know. I get people that I hadn't seen in 10 years that'll come up to me or message me, and they'll be like, man, this one time you said this totally changed my life. Like, I've not been the same. And I don't even remember the conversation, right? Yeah. But see, that's what God, I think, has called us to be able to do and to be, and everyone at different levels, right? Yeah. But if my identity was, no, I'm this position, and this is what that position looks like or does or acts like, then I would compromise really who I really was called to be. And so I think that was a big driving factor for sure. And the Lord used it for whatever he used it for. I don't even know that I'll know till I'm dead what that was all about. Yeah. I don't know. But does that make sense? But I knew in the meantime, that's why I was there for sure. And it always was. I never wanted to have influence or leadership. For me, it was always about the impact that it could make. And I just felt like if I did that, the money would follow. Yeah. Like in Matthew 6, that all these things would be added. Seek me first, and then all these other things would be added. So I was like, well, you do the adding, and I'll do the seeking, right? I'll do that part, because that's what you called me to do, right? And then I'm just not going to worry, which is what that whole verse is about, is worry. Yeah. Worry. People worried about everything. People worried about stuff that will not matter 100 years from now. 100 years from now, nobody's going to care what you drove, where you lived. None of that. All that's going to matter is what kind of impact did you make? Did you get to heaven? Did you get your family to heaven? Did you get everybody else that you know? Yeah. 100,000 years from now, that's the only thing that is going to matter. And we worry about all sorts. And Jesus was like, don't worry about all that. You worry about this, and I'll take care of that. And I would hope I'm living proof that he has, you know? And that's why I don't feel bad for it. I don't feel bad about it, because I'm not. If he blesses me, cool, and I'm going to use it. I'm going to give. I mean, it's been, It's crazy, like what God's caused us to even give.
Yeah.
We gave more last year than I was making in the job I quit 5 years ago.
Amazing.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And I say that in total gratitude, but like people think it's the opposite. Like, well, if you do that, you don't stick with this thing. Like, you follow what God has you do, He'll have you doing stuff that just is, to me, it's still like, it's impossible. I'm like, that is impossible. How is that possible? And I've never said that publicly, but I think, I heard it from someone and I've seen people, and I'm like, man, like that's impactful. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. But all the other stuff is just trivial. Like, whatever. However God wants to use me, great. However God wants to, whatever the vehicle is, great. But it never will change who I know I am, who God's called me to be. Does that make sense? Yeah. But people think, well, if you do that, you're missing out on all this. I missed out on nothing. Nothing. Love 5 kids, been married 17 years. I'm crazy about my wife. I think she's crazy about me. My kids think I'm like they're the superhero, so like, and that's the stuff that matters the most anyway, right? Mm-hmm. And so, so after that, our priorities are God first, then His Word, then my wife, then my children, then my important relationships, key relationships, then everybody else has to get in line after that. Yeah. Nothing goes above the Word and God, not even my wife. Mm-hmm. If Brittany said, hey, I'm not going to church anymore, I'd be like, well, have fun with that, but I'm going to church. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's the priority structure. Yeah. And if we set the priority structure right, based on the Word, based on what Jesus said, He's gonna have your back. And then what's crazy is even though you could have challenges you have to overcome, He will make it easier than you could have ever done it in your own strength. Mm-hmm. That's what I've discovered, right? But follow that piece of it. Follow the peace as a couple, and just watch what God will do. But never get into a position where you're chasing it, right? And that's why I read that verse, because I don't want to wake up and the first thing I think about is a deal or money or what I want to drive or where I want to live. All that should be an afterthought or a byproduct. I think is a better word. Should be a byproduct of how we live and represent and walk in our identity. Yeah. That was a really long answer to your question.
That was a great answer.
Yeah, so encouraging and also a little bit convicting. I think it's super easy in our industries to be able to think, okay, where's my next deal going to come from, or where's this? But just the fact that you ground yourself every single day, and you may miss a day, but the fact that you ground yourself, that I always talk to people and talk about this to my friends, is that if we wait till the end of the day to start grounding ourselves with Christ, everything during that day is reactive. And we're not renewing our mind in the morning to be able to be proactive and go through the day with Christ at the forefront of our minds to be able to have that impact.
Yeah, so that's so good. Yeah, that's so good. And that's how I start. That's first thing I do every morning is get in the Word and get into prayer. Yeah. Now I'm walking, which has been great. Weather's nice, so I walk and I pray. Yeah. So, but I don't do anything else first, because that's again modeling after what Jesus said to do. Seek Him first. I'm like, well, that's got to be a daily thing. Yep. And the days I don't do it, those are the bad days.
Yep, agreed.
Those are the days you're just like, you feel like you're gonna catch up, just doing this all day long, right? Yeah. So,
well, that if you don't feel encouraged after that or life changed after that, you need to check your temperature because something's wrong. But we just want to give a huge shout out to Dennis. Thanks so much for being on the podcast. We really appreciated you coming and just dropping a bomb of knowledge and just encouragement, and it was super encouraging to me. I'm not going to speak for her, but I know she was encouraged. But we just also want to give a huge shout out to Tap In Studios. If you guys are looking to do a podcast, get a hold of me. We'll be able to get you in contact with them. But Dennis, thank you so much.
Thanks,
we really appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Keep it up. It's awesome.
Thanks.